an important day for us because it's the first time in the history of Canada that we have a special day in which we can acknowledge the existence of survivors and the experiences that they've had. In addition to that, of course, the full history of residential schools and the impact upon Canadian society is part of what this day is all about. The important thing of this day, of course, is to memorialize those who were unable to come back and who no longer are with us, and to acknowledge that the impact on their lives of residential schools was dramatic and traumatic, and that we need to give credit to those who have been able to thrive despite that experience. I think as well that we also need to acknowledge those who are working hard to overcome the history of residential schools and their impacts on Canadian society, are working towards reconciliation. So I want to encourage all of you on this day to understand that history, to do what you can about reconciliation, and to make a commitment to continue to do all that you can, including influencing those who do not yet understand what reconciliation is all about. Have a good day. Miigwech.
Hello, and welcome to the Inclusion Incorporated conversation about the Day for Truth and Reconciliation. And I'm so pleased to be joined today by two incredible colleagues who I'll introduce in just a moment. My name is Andrea Carey. My pronouns are she, her, and hers, and I'm the Chief Inclusion Officer with Inclusion Incorporated. And this is just such an important opportunity for us to each learn, unlearn, and reflect. And so we wanted to create space for us to do that together today. I'm really grateful to be an uninvited guest living on Coast Salish territory here in Victoria, which is home of the nations of the Wasanich, Esquimalt, and Songhees peoples. And I've been living here for many years, and I continue to want to learn and really celebrate the beautiful lands and the cultures of these people. And tomorrow is another opportunity for me to do that and to join some of the celebrations and memorials that are taking place in our community. So I want to welcome into the room our two incredible collaborators, Beth Hudson and Sarah Jacknife. And I'll do a little brief introduction on them, and then they're going to share a little bit more about themselves. So Beth is traditionally from Sucker Creek First Nation in Treaty 8 and currently resides in the Northwest Territories in the Decho region, and has been an incredible influence in creating spaces for Indigenous youth to really learn, play, and celebrate where they live, and learn to really live on the land as well. And so her passion and enthusiasm for that space has just is continually inspiring to me. And so I'm really grateful to have Beth join us today. And Sarah Jacknife is Métis and a member of the Elizabeth Métis settlement in Treaty 6 territory. She's just finished her Master of Public Policy in Indigenous Policy, and has worked in student recruitment and Indigenous placements and ensuring that Indigenous folks have a place and a space to share their voices. And she's coming to us today from Auckland, New Zealand, and but is doing lots of work with us across these spaces and sharing understandings of Indigenous histories and knowledge, and we're looking forward to hearing from both of them. So Beth, do you want to continue your introduction?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just so grateful to be here as always, and to have some space to just have some meaningful discussion. I'm excited for that. I hope that if people do have questions, that they're not afraid to ask. Now is a really great time. I think we're really open to having discussions about it. It's a new day, a new experience for all of us in terms of what, tomorrow kind of really means. And I know we're going to definitely spend some time chatting about that. You summed it up really well. I'm coming to you right now from Sidley First Nation, also known as Fort Simpson, which is in the Decho region of the Northwest Territories. I was essentially born and raised in a Amiskwaciwâskahikan in Treaty 6 territory, but my family comes from Treaty 8 territory. I'm currently in Treaty 11, so it's just really interesting, my own personal journey, across the lands to where I am now. I'm so grateful to be a guest in Denendeh. So I live within a First Nations community right now. I get to work for the regional First Nation authority right now, which is absolutely amazing, at DHO First Nations. And yeah, I'm currently the regional on the land coordinator, which is really great because I get to share a lot of my knowledge and experience in on the land educational programming and youth programming, which is really, really great. But it's providing me the opportunity to reconnect in so many ways. For me to learn these important skills in my journey to reconnection. And as everyone knows, if I can help anyone else along the way in reconnecting and understanding a little bit better, who we are as a people or anything like that, I'm always here for that, and just happy to be a part of the discussions today. Hopefully my internet stays good. We know how the northern internet can be. But yeah, I'm really excited to be here and be a part of this conversation. So thank you for making this space for me.
Thanks so much, Beth, and lovely to have you here with us. Sarah, over to you to do a bit more of an introduction.
I think you kind of captured a lot of the main pieces. But my name is Sarah. My pronouns are she, her, and I had the pleasure of growing up in a very traditional Métis household in Elizabeth Métis settlement, and kind of have lived across Western Canada. And most of my experience is working in higher education, supporting Indigenous students and working a lot with Indigenous communities, employers. And I obviously have a big interest also in Indigenous policy. And so I tend to kind of approach every question around how do we kind of make some long-term or system changes. So you'll probably hear that in a lot of my answers is really kind of having that more very critical lens at what we currently have and how do we make those changes. But yeah, very similar to Beth, so grateful to be here and really honored to share this space with these two incredible women. And hopefully we can have some great conversations that people have some actionable items that they can kind of walk away with for tomorrow and feel a little bit more aware of kind of why we're celebrating this day and what it means.
Yeah, thanks so much. So tomorrow is both Orange Shirt Day and the first ever National Day for Truth and Reconciliation. So I'm curious what the words truth and reconciliation mean to each of you. And so Sarah, maybe we'll lead off with you.
Sure. So I think for me, I think those words have, particularly reconciliation, have become such a buzzword within the last few years. And I feel like a lot of people don't fully understand it. And so for me, I always want to start with truth. I feel like if you move into the reconciliation, which I think a lot of people would say is more the action-oriented stage, so looking at the TRC, looking at what your company is doing, if you don't have the truth, then the action isn't going to be very meaningful. And I think you're going to be a lot delayed. And so it's really about learning about the truths of Indigenous people and Canada's treatment of Indigenous people. There's a lot of nuances within that truth. Some of that truth can be very hard for a lot of people to understand. They often don't want to hear it. But then there's also lots of powerful truths. I think a lot about stereotypes of Indigenous people. And so part of it is also breaking those stereotypes and hearing a lot of the resilience that Indigenous people have. And so, yeah, for me, when I hear the word truth, I often think it's about taking a breath and taking a moment and just listening and learning, and being willing to experience all the emotions that come with that. And then for me, once you've kind of gone through that process, the reconciliation is thinking, okay, I've started the process of learning. I'm starting to understand what my role is as a settler, or as a guest on the territory. How do I reconcile with my space in this territory? And then that's kind of starting the more, I would say, action process of kind of looking at what does this mean for us moving forward.
Yeah, thanks so much, Sarah. And I mean, what a year that we've really surfaced the truths that, so many Canadians hadn't really reckoned with. And just such an opportunity to reflect on what that means and to start to understand it in a very different way. So Beth, I'm going to go to you to ask the same question about what those words truth and reconciliation mean to you.
Yeah, I think for me, like a lot of, Indigenous Canadians have a lot of, complex feelings about what those words mean, especially in this day and age. And like the lived experiences that I have on the ground and as a person really can demonstrate that, we're nowhere close to really having the education needed, and the resources and opportunities available to kind of overcome a lot of the barriers that are in place and a lot of the, unfortunate realities of what our people, are faced with, especially when it comes to reconciliation, and what that means and what that's going to mean for all Canadians moving forward. Because I know, without the education behind a lot of that, you're not going to be able to understand what it means when people, want to reaccess their traditional land, when people want to reconnect with their families, when people want, even to get the basic questions answered about who they are as a person. Like, that has been taken away in so many ways. And, there is certainly a lot of irreversible trauma that's occurred, irreversible separation. We know that in this day and age, there's so many Indigenous youth that are either adopted out or in foster care. And, I've been a youth that's gone through that. And that's been something that, as an Indigenous person, I've had to come to terms with. But I've also had to bring my family along for the ride as well, both my Indigenous and non-Indigenous family. And it's not always easy. There's a lot of, burden put on me to be the one to have these conversations, to be the one to push these conversations forward. And we know that is also a lot of work, a lot of labor that we put on Indigenous people. Our voices are quite quiet. If you're looking at, the population of Canada, for example, and you understand the loss of population since really, settlers came, and what that's really meant, and why sometimes when you're trying to be as loud as you can, fighting for your rights, when you only are a fraction of the population that you used to be, it really is up to others to help amplify our voices and do the work to become educated in what we're trying to say, and be allies and help us to really speak for what we need and what that means. And again, there's going to be a lot of uncomfortable conversations. There's a lot of nations looking to move towards models of self-governance. And what does that mean? Because if, First Nations start to become governing nations, that means that, non-Indigenous Canadians are going to have to exist under Indigenous law as well. We know, looking back at the treaties, that those were treaties that were meant to recognize both sides, and both sides, both natural and, socially constructed laws. That was kind of where a lot of, the anger comes from, is knowing that we had, sat at tables together and had conversations. And really what we know about Truth and Reconciliation now is that our stories haven't been told, our stories haven't been listened to. The way that Canadians, and really, the general public are educated about Indigenous, histories and Indigenous rights and Indigenous contemporary issues are all very whitewashed. They're all very Eurocentric. They all are generally through a Western lens. And I would say things are getting a bit better. And we can talk about this kind of as we go through the conversation. But it is going to be really interesting to see what people are going to be doing tomorrow, what they're going to be investing their time in, and if there is going to be any allyship or what's going to come of it. Because I don't think it should be on Indigenous people tomorrow to be pushing towards reconciliation. I really do think it's on others to be the ones to step in and see. And yeah, we can generate some ideas here today.
Yeah, absolutely. And such a good point that the onus is not on Indigenous people to do this work. Indigenous people, in my experience, have been the ones telling us how to proceed and how to do this work. And then we're not listening. We haven't been paying attention. We haven't been listening to the truths and understanding those and figuring out what those mean to each of us individually, and what our individual and collective responsibilities are to answer the 94 calls from the Truth and Reconciliation Report, and to kind of dig in and do that heavy lifting for ourselves and collectively then to elevate this work forward. So I'm curious, tomorrow is the National Day of Truth and Reconciliation. It's Orange Shirt Day. What do you think people should be doing to honor residential school survivors, those that were lost, the over 6,500 unmarked graves that have been discovered so far? What does that look like? Where do you think people should be spending time, energy, and how should they honor that? So Beth, I'm going to go back to you.
Sure. Yeah. It's been really interesting because I have not been actively, developing my own resources or developing really anything for this day coming up. It's not something that I'd really planned for. It's not something that, I'm super invested in terms of myself engaging in sort of critical action. I have been keeping my eyes and ears open though for the past kind of week or two to see what's been coming out. And even on social media right now, I follow so many different accounts, and throughout the past week, there's been so many incredible resources shared. There's already people compiling lists upon lists upon lists in so many ways of how you can, access tools and resources for education, whether you want to watch movies or read books, or so there's just so many options. So I would say, in terms of tomorrow, think about, what you yourself would be most interested in. Is it film? There's tons of Indigenous film you can watch right now. There's Indigenous films on Netflix right now that you can watch that actually do a great job, at least introducing the content of what a lot of the truth we still need to acknowledge is and are. I've been amazed by the amount of accessible elders that are putting videos out, or providing talks and things like that. I've seen tons of interactive workshops and websites and these links popping up all week. I see that there are some organizations putting out a week long of truth and reconciliation activities and things like that. And so I think for me, I'm not coming with a comprehensive list of, go check out, X, Y, and Z, but I certainly know that even just from passively scrolling and passively kind of just trying to keep an ear out for things, there's so many people trying to share resources and information. And so, for all ages as well. We know that there's Molly of Denali, and there's a great episode out there. If you want to go look that up right now to watch with your children tomorrow, that would be amazing. Like, do some of that research and figure it out. But there's so many resources out there for all ages and for families. And I'm kind of really encouraging people to try and find a way to learn that is going to be meaningful to you, whatever that is. And I really encourage the Indigenous Canada course as well. That's open to all. You can Google that and find it. If you do want to kind of just start from scratch and have a really good self-directed learning with lots of videos and amazing people, students and friends of mine, when we were back in university, you're in that video, and it's so incredible to see. So, there's lots of steps that can be taken. And I think as long as you're actually doing something tomorrow to engage and to try and learn, that would be meaningful to me. I don't expect, it took me 4+ years of university to even understand myself a little bit better. I don't expect people to, come out experts in Indigenous history tomorrow or anything like that. But I do ask that people try and access educational resources that you didn't have in school. If you have questions or anything where you think back into school, like, what were you taught? What were you told about Indigenous people in Canada? Maybe you need to relearn some of those things. So, take some time to self-reflect, and then go forth really on any path that's going to be meaningful for you to engage and hopefully learn, even if that's simply going for a walk, and just being, one with nature, and just understanding that, the land is also something that we need to protect and look after. And if we don't have land to look after, the land isn't going to be there to look after us. And so sometimes just going out in nature and just sitting with yourself and appreciating the grass, the trees, the sky around you, that's also honoring, I think a lot more than just yourself in that way. And if that's all you can do, then that's also meaningful. Those moments of just quiet self-reflection. So I'll leave that at that for me.
Thanks, Beth. That was pretty thorough. We have actually shared some resources in a discussion guide that Sarah helped us put together. So that is actually, you can get that if you haven't already, and just by emailing connect@inclusionincorporated.com, and we can share that with you. And it's an opportunity for each individual to reflect sort of in your community organization, and also shares a list of resources. So Sarah, I'm going to go to you to build on the items that Beth shared about how people should be spending that day.
Yeah, Beth, you did phenomenal. I have not much I can add to that. I think Beth captured a lot of pieces. I think the excuse, I don't know where to start, or there's no resource, just doesn't work. You can Google, and there's always so much material now that's coming out, or, even I love social media. So even just following some key people on social media, you will find so many resources. The other thing I would probably say, just to kind of add, is doing a little bit of a self-reflection or a scan of where spaces you spend a lot of time. So whether everyone is part of an organization, whether that's a sports organization or your work, or if you're part of a community club, is there Indigenous representation? So that would be my first kind of question I would ask you to do. And then the second one, if there's not, can you advocate? And so, maybe it's spending 20 minutes tomorrow drafting an email and saying, why don't we have any Indigenous representation in our company, particular at a leadership level? Why isn't the sports organization that I'm a part of have a traditional land acknowledgement or something like that? And so that would be, I think, something that would also push you kind of forward in past tomorrow. And then it also puts ownership on you because it's something you are taking space. It's not something really abstract. It's something you participate in a day to day. And that type of advocacy is where change really starts to happen. And I think you might be surprised when you start getting answers. There is sometimes a lack of understanding and awareness. And so sometimes it's just putting a spotlight on it. So that would be my advice for you tomorrow. It's just, taking some time to scan where are you spending a lot of your time and is there Indigenous representation? If not, acting upon that.
Thank you both for those such great answers and so much for our audience to think about and for them to individually take action on. So my next question is about the Truth and Reconciliation. We published 94 calls to action 6 years ago when that commission report came out. And there's been lots of criticism about where we're at in terms of moving those forward and how they've been implemented or not implemented. What positive change have each of you seen since over this past 6 years? And maybe Sarah, we'll start with you.
Yeah. So I guess for me, when I graduated from my undergrad, I graduated into a bit of like a post-TRC era because I graduated in 2017. So a lot of my career has actually been a direct impact of the TRC. A lot of my jobs were like Indigenous strategy funding from the kind of TRC. So I would say I have seen a lot of positive changes in terms of some organizations putting money towards it or just being like, we need to really make an intentional effort to bring in Indigenous voices. I would say a lot of the other positive change I've seen have been within this last year. So I really feel like with the Black Lives Movement in the States, it really, I think, impacted how Canadians are also thinking about racism and just diversity and inclusion in general. And then, of course, with the Kamloops residential school information coming. So I feel like the last year I've seen a ton of change and just a different lens. And then just in terms of some of the I guess the drawbacks or some of the criticism of it being slow. One thing that I have seen that I often, and Andrea and I work on this quite a bit, is that a lot of organizations I feel like are trying to check a lot of boxes or do a lot of catch up in a very short period of time when it comes to diversity and inclusion and Indigenous inclusion. And there's a tendency to loop everything in one umbrella and be like, we're just going to do all of this, even though we've never focused on it before. And it's very easy for Indigenous initiatives to fall off the radar. And so I think there's a lot of good intentions of, yes, we're going to focus on TRC, but when you're doing things about, gender inclusion and newcomers inclusion and accessibility inclusion, it's really easy. Like Beth said, Indigenous voices are such a small fraction of the whole. And if they're not in a leadership position, it's very easy for them to get tuned out, or that's another your initiative. And so I would just really encourage companies, if there are any companies here, to try to keep that as a separate entity to make sure that it actually happens and that you have dedicated resources and dedicated staff, and you're actually thinking about it as more of a long-term strategy versus just a small component of something much larger. So that's where I've seen, I think it can get a little bit slower. In a really kind of strategy policy perspective.
That's great, Sarah. Yeah, and we've seen some really good examples of that, and some examples that it's like, okay, how and what else are you going to do? So, thanks for sharing that perspective. Beth, over to you around that same question in terms of what people should be doing in positive changes around the TRC.
Yeah, I would say, as an Indigenous person who also, really went through key learning moments in my life through university when this was all happening. I think I started getting into the field of sort of Indigenous sport, recreation, and wellness right around 2013. And it's really interesting. I have a lot of memories with TRC. I was there at the final stop of the TRC tour in Edmonton. I was actually there with one of my best Indigenous and one of my best non-Indigenous friends who can, to this day, are incredibly meaningful people to me. And so there's a lot for me to unpack kind of around this topic, I guess. In terms of the calls to action, I jumped into the field of sport and rec. And I jumped into the field of working for the Aboriginal Sports Circle and working for the different provincial and territorial Aboriginal sport bodies. And when you work on the Indigenous side of things, you know that we're a little bit quicker to action when it comes to Indigenous-led initiatives. And so within the organizations, the Indigenous organizations I've worked for over the years, I've seen a lot of adoption of TRC or commitment to TRC in certain ways. And so the way I saw that in the sport world has really been just the ongoing commitment to NAIG, especially so the North American Indigenous Games, and really all of kind of the Indigenous sport tournaments and pathways that we know have either been developed or created or trying to be integrated successfully kind of, across jurisdictions in Canada. I have been on the ground both working with organizations directly about this. I've been on the ground as a programmer. It's really interesting how these calls to actions are, really a part of my life in a professional way. That being said, I've seen some great things. I've seen some small things. Again, I've seen the area of sport and rec potentially hitting on little bits and pieces of this. We see, amazing women like, Janice kind of publishing books about Indigenous athletes and really highlighting, the importance of recognizing all of the amazing impacts that Indigenous people have had over the, not only the past few hundred years, but before that too. But then you see on the non-Indigenous side, a little bit more maybe on the health sector sides, the education sides. I, in a lived experience, see things going both ways, where I see some school systems trying to adopt TRC or push for Indigenous initiatives. And that's really wonderful to see that, there's some really great things coming out of Yukon, for example, where they are implementing some amazing calls to action in terms of providing both Indigenous and non-Indigenous children the opportunity to start to learn and explore and play through an Indigenous lens. Those are really amazing things. But then I've also seen, schools and jurisdictions still ending gym classes, still ending time outside and on the land, still, pulling back important cultural opportunities and programs because funding is always an issue, and those programs are still often the first to go. And so I oftentimes will challenge, my friends, my colleagues. I'll even ask, the medical staff that I go and see when I go see my appointments and say, have you even read the calls to action for your specific sector? And the majority of the time they haven't. They haven't reviewed all 94. They haven't reviewed the different, essentially areas that a lot of the recommendations are all grouped under. So we have specific recommendations for health. We have specific recommendations for education. We have specific recommendations for lawmakers. And there's so much more than that too. And so I would like to see, really, I want to see everyone working together, right? Everyone working together and breaking down barriers and moving forward as one. I know that's a really big ask and not something that's realistically going to happen. So yeah, I think a starting point in terms of where these calls to action have gone is just for people to really take the time to familiarize themselves with them, especially in how they impact your life, and think beyond professionally. Think about your personal life too, and how these things are going to impact you or potentially change things for you. Again, if part of those calls to action are giving more autonomy and authority to Indigenous First Nations, it's not only First Nations people that they are going to be governing. So what does that mean to you? What does that mean moving forward? And, when you're looking at the calls to action and whatnot, it's important to recognize that everyone is going to need to change, not just us, and not just the non-Indigenous people too. The reconciliation part is the part of us working together, ideally in an ideal world. And so everyone has to have an understanding of these things. And it's really great that we have so many tools and resources already gifted to us to lead us down a path. And that's really what I see the calls to action for, and really hope, people can just familiarize themselves with them, and really try to actively find ways to engage in that action.
Beautiful answer. I'm going to hold up my little Truth and Reconciliation booklet that I keep on my desk and refer to often. But anyone can download this for free on the Truth and Reconciliation Calls for Action. Just Google it and you'll find it. It's also on our resources sheet that in the discussion guide that we referenced earlier. So I'm going to come to a last kind of wrap-up question for each of you. So Beth, I'll begin with you. What is one next step that you would ask our audience to take to move Truth and Reconciliation forward?
I think that listening is just always so important. Whether that's listening to our elders or listening to stories or, just taking the time again to sit and listen, whether that's indoors or outdoors, and trying to find that little bit of connection. I think that for me, when I think about Truth and Reconciliation and my role and the things that I'm involved in, I know that I only ever truly feel that connection when I'm outside. I know that for these things to truly ground me and hit home for me, I do need to be outside and, again, experiencing a lot of, different sort of sensory experiences, because that is the essence of, my perspective as an Indigenous person. It's knowing that when I look out my window right now and I see the trees in my yard, just how much I appreciate that they're even there. I'm so grateful to live in a place where I'm surrounded by greenery and I'm able to access a lot of cool things. And, yesterday I took the opportunity to actually look up an elder of mine. I in my story to reconnection, didn't have access to many elders. And there's only really one that I had at a young age, and his name is Vincent Steinhauer, and he has passed on now. But for me, I would say look up Vincent Steinhauer's video, look up any words of his if you want to do something that would be super meaningful, and listen to the words he has to say, because taking the time yesterday to sit down and listen to that in preparation for today was a little bit mind-blowing, because I'm incredibly grateful to be where I am now, learning the skills that I'm doing now and trying to continue to pass knowledge on to the next generation. It's interesting when I took a moment to pause and reflect and listen to his words, because everything that he was saying in the YouTube videos that are available of him are all of the guiding factors and teachings that I follow to this day. And so it was interesting to be able to kind of sit back and see those sort of concrete affirmations. And the elders that I'm surrounded by nowadays, they echo the same things, the same sort of sentiments, the same sort of importance to look after yourself, to look after your community, to look after the land around you. There's such a collective and that community-based essence of what it means to be Indigenous. And I'm so grateful to be in a spot where I now get to sort of reconnect to that part of my identity. I know there are so many Indigenous Canadians out there that feel lost and disconnected as well. And so if they're watching this and feel like they've never had an elder to connect to, look up Vincent Steinhauer. He's someone great to start with. And there's plenty of other elders out there too that, are accessible in this day and age, whether it's through media or video or anything like that. And I think that, if you don't want to read from a book or watch a fancy Hollywood video or anything about what's happened and, about that truth piece, you can, look up those elders. Sit down and listen to some of the well-known elders and leaders that we have out there and their stories. I think they're really, really amazing and really, really touching. And, maybe you'll find that a little bit more meaningful. Or if you have, access to anything, within your workplace, or now I know there's some workplaces kind of offering, tools and things to do too. So yeah, just to take that time and to do that, and to also be just so caring for yourself. It's a lot of really, really hard subject matter. It's hard for everyone. It's, no one really wants to dive into a lot of that subject matter, and it's hard. And, the discovery of a lot of the children at the residential schools, again, that's not something that's unknown to us. Reflect on the TRC report. You can look into that right now and you can see that we've known, we continue to know. That was not a surprise to us, but it was very traumatizing. And it still is very traumatizing, especially as we know there are, thousands and thousands of more lost, children that are out there right now, but we do know they exist. Again, it's not going to be surprising when we continue down this road of uncovering more. And, we've noticed the decrease in conversation about it, certainly. We know that the shock and awe is kind of gone now, and people are starting to get back to their regular lives. And now we have this day. So, I would just say reflect, continue to reflect. And it's a hard journey, and honor yourself if you are engaging, and be gentle on yourself. If you are engaging, it is quite triggering and hard to go through. And it's unfortunately not the only example of, genocidal, colonial actions that have taken place worldwide. We are not the only ones. Even if you're not within Canada, you can learn about the Indigenous people where you're at right now. I mean, it's so amazing that Sarah is over there right now across the world, and yet here she is, a part of this conversation, and we're all connected in so many ways. And, to just continuously reflect that it isn't just about Indigenous Canadians, I think it is about, the global impact that has really happened. And yeah, just about continuously trying to move forward and just have these conversations. So I look forward to the next one for sure.
Thanks, Beth. I think that was many next steps. So people, lots to follow. But your points around connecting with elders and traditional knowledge keepers really landed for me personally. And I know that's been a huge part of my journey and my learning, and helped maybe support me as I navigated through the news we were, this summer around the bodies, the unmarked graves being found. And it was like, I knew that was coming, but wow, is that ever hard to navigate? So yeah, thanks for surfacing so many pieces and such rich examples for people and what their next steps should be. So Sarah, I'm going to go to you for one next step, or a few that you want people to take to move truth and reconciliation forward.
Yeah, maybe I'll end us off with a little bit of a metaphor. I tend to be a very visual person. Many people have probably done the exercise where if I ask you to write your name, you have your dominant hand of how you write your name, you write it, you don't think anything of it, super easy, looks perfect, you're very comfortable with what it looks like. What if I ask you to write your name with your non-dominant hand? It might be messy, it's uncomfortable, you might be embarrassed to show because you're like, it's not perfect yet. But the reality is you haven't practiced it. You've maybe done it a few times. It still needs improvement. It still needs time. And so I think that would be kind of my metaphor in terms of what to take away, is that in a lot of ways, this work is writing with your non-dominant hand and kind of rewiring your brain in a way to think, how can I use both hands in a way that makes sense for me, and so that I can see my name and how I represent. And just being aware that it's a learning process, and that you're probably comparing yourself to people who've been doing this work for a very, very long time. And so we've had time to learn how to kind of write our name in both hands. So I'll leave that metaphor. I hope that made sense. In my mind, it did. So I think that would be what I'd say. Thank you both for having me part of this conversation. It's been really great.
Yeah, what a beautiful way to end us. Thank you for that metaphor, Sarah. And just huge thank you to both of you for being here and sharing and being vulnerable with us and supporting the learning of our audience so that they have some ways to move forward both tomorrow and as we go forward, because tomorrow is one day, but this work is deep work, it's long-term work, and you need to start somewhere and then have a path to continue along. So you gave us many, many pieces of opportunities to move that forward. And I also encourage each person to download that discussion guide and to think really deeply about how you're going to move this forward personally, in your community, in the organizations that you're part of. And so I'll just end us there and hold my hands up to both of you and say thank you so much for being here. And I'm just so grateful to have you in my life and as part of our team and sharing this with others. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.